questions, maybe just let me know.
Tom, if I can ask a question, I'm Harry.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for this. I do realize this is all Python based. Is there anything for C# developers? And probably
yeah, I know there is a C++ version of TA-Lib. So TA-Lib is actually written in C++ originally, and Python actually uses C++ in the backend. So that's why TA-Lib is actually pretty good, because it's quite fast and it runs, it's quite heavily optimized. And I think you can import C++ libraries in C# as well. So I have a feeling that you should be able to use it in C# too. So you all, but basically what you do is, you know, when I imported the TA-Lib at the beginning, it actually imports the C++ part of it, and then it just builds a backend in Python, or a wrapper in Python around it. So the actual TA-Lib is in fact written in C style code. So there is a few questions here.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah. Oh, Bailey, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. My question is, for all these technical indicators, we can look up Wikipedia, see what it does, but sometimes it's still not intuitive. Yes. I wonder, is there a way that through simple simulation we can get a deeper understanding about all those technical indicators? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few things. It's actually not easy sometimes to understand that, and it's not intuitive. And quite frankly, there's a few indicators that I don't really understand either, or I'm not necessarily always seeing the point of it. One of the things you can do is, for example, you could do a regression analysis between the indicator values and the returns in the time series, and then see if the indicator values are somewhat predictive. So if there is a correlation between the returns in the next period and the indicator value at this period, then you could actually say, well, I don't really know what this indicator does, but it has a correlation to the returns. So it must be something interesting here. Okay, so that's, in a sense, probably the best way to see whether indicators have any merit. Now, what I'm going to show you next is interesting, because I talk a little bit about candlestick patterns. And what's funny about candlestick patterns is that I know nothing about candlestick patterns whatsoever. I haven't really used them. I don't really know even their names. I don't actually ever care about them. But what I do is I show you, even without not having the slightest clue about candlestick patterns myself, I actually build a strategy around it. And what I want to do today is I want to show you how I did this, and some interesting insights into what you can do. And this goes really a little bit deeper into the guts of TA-Lib, so into the guts of programming. So get ready for this. And I also use a little bit of machine learning for that as well. So before I do this, is there any more questions? Abil, you raised your hand.
I mean, yeah, sorry, even this is slightly off track, but if I wanted to get, I mean, where would I look for data sources to perform these kinds of analysis?
Well, I just, you know what I showed you in the notebook? That's Yahoo Finance, or there's a Python package called yfinance.
Oh, that comes with,
What's that? Say it again.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, you did talk about that. Sorry.
So yfinance is actually pretty good. If you have an Interactive Brokers account, you can also get market data from Interactive Brokers, for example. It's a little bit more involved to get the market data out of Interactive Brokers, but that's also quite a good data source, and it has a huge amount of data available. So, you know, there's heaps of other data sources, but if you actually have to go and pay for them, they're usually quite expensive. So depends what your needs are, but definitely, oh yeah, there's Quant as well. Quant is a good data source. I actually use yfinance quite a bit. It's quite handy, and it's specifically for the fact that it also has options data. So that's quite a big plus of this.
Fair enough. Yeah.
All right. So
I think fans would be good for me. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. If there's no more questions right now, I continue. Ask a few questions. I'm really happy to answer them. Generally, what I found is there's usually a lot of people that have a lot of questions, that ask a lot. So if you would like, please feel free to ask me some questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm sure some of you will have come across some of the problems with this, or they have general coding questions or questions on how to use strategies. So please, if anyone's interested, go ahead. There's one from Paul, right?
Sorry, I was going to say, what sort of refinements would you be talking about applying to that strategy?
So there's a few things you can do, right? Like, first of all, you could use a different machine learning algorithm, right? You don't necessarily need to use linear regression. Secondly, and most importantly, probably, I would probably never trade this strategy just on the SPY alone. I would probably I would apply it to a basket of different ETFs, for example. I would maybe also put a few less common ETFs in maybe the emerging markets, and see how it performs with different ETFs. And so if it still gives me decent results with different ETFs, I put them in a portfolio and I would trade them as a portfolio. Usually when this happens and you choose the right ETFs, the results quite often will be quite uncorrelated as well. So you end up getting a much better Sharpe ratio for your resulting strategy than you would if you just trade them by themselves. Okay.
Yeah,
does that answer your question? Anyone else? Please, there's no wrong questions. There's one, Claudio.
Yes, my question is, how does your background in physics and with math helps you in this task of doing quantitative finance?
Claudio, I actually had a really hard time understanding you. Maybe your microphone is a little bit.
Okay, just let me fix it.
Actually, it's already a little bit better.
Oh, is it better? Okay. Okay. How does your background in physics helps you in the day-by-day quant tasks or the quant finance day-by-day?
Well. Okay. The quick answer is, first of all, when you're a physicist, you learn to read data and interpret data. That's what you do all day long. Secondly, I used to work in engineering quite a lot, and I actually used to work a lot with like computation, and so I learned a lot about like making computation a bit more efficient, so that helped me to like quicker run this stuff. And then also generally just crunching numbers. Physics, I mean, it's not like a direct help, but it definitely has made it probably a bit easier for me to get into it and understand what people are talking about. I hope that answers it.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. There was also a question from Goku.
Hi Tom, thanks for the presentation. What would be a good way to eliminate some features? Like maybe some candlestick patterns are not good. Some like feature selection, like backward elimination or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's various ways to do feature selection. I'm always a little bit. So the problem with machine learning is in finance that when you start with all the stuff like feature selection, you end up overfitting really quickly. And so if it was me personally, right? And this is by the way, and this is my experience, it's really different from traditional machine learning, right? In traditional machine learning, you have very static data sets that don't change. And this is not quite the case in finance. The rules change everything. So if I saw what I see here, I probably wouldn't eliminate features. I would use it as it is. And yes, if you did that, you could make your backtest look a lot better. Like you could make it look stellar. But the problem is this will not work going forward. You know, you don't know whether the features you just eliminated might actually be just the right features going forward. And while this is something that might work really well when you do, for example, image recognition and so on, the cats and dogs, or the shape of cats and dogs, doesn't really change, but the market does change a lot. And so what's really important here is to see that it's the methodology that matters far more than the features that you use. Okay, so personally, even though I would find a feature set that works way better in the backtest than the one I've used, I wouldn't use it. I just would stay away from it, because with machine learning, and especially in finance, as soon as you just put your eyes on a data set and you're already overfitting, basically. That's how it is. So it's very dangerous to do that. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for insight. Some people use like a forward, what was it? Walk forward analysis. Like I think they're sliding the window a bit and averaging it. Do you have? Yeah.
That is
do you
something
find it helpful as well?
Yeah, that is something you can do. There's two problems with walk forward analysis, right? One is you if you make the time, so basically, for those who don't know, what it is you retrain your model every so often, like every time, like, you know, let's say you retrain your model once a month or once a week or even once a day if you trade really high frequency. Now, why would you do that? You would do that because you think, well, the past data or the quality of the past data has changed, and we need to build a new model. But in reality, in finance, you should really only start to retrain your model once you feel that the market has actually changed its behavior. I mean, you should retrain your model now and then, but if you do it too often, it's actually really detrimental. And I've seen this happening a lot, that when people use too much walk forward analysis, it's actually really detrimental to the trading strategy going forward. So really, you know, it's worth retraining your model now and then, but you have to be really careful how you do it. So there's no use to just mindlessly retrain your model like all the time. Again, it's a type of overfitting, and I would not recommend it. Okay, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, there was another question from someone who raised their hand and you took it away. If you want, please feel free to ask it again.
Hi, Tom.
Wiley. Yep.
Yeah, I got one. So you're emphasizing the methodology is much more important than the features. So could you, could you give us a bit summaries on the methodology you're referring to?
So when I talk about the methodology, I was basically referring to the fact, first of all, I'm not focusing on a specific magical indicator or a magical chart pattern. I think those chart patterns, they appear so sparsely that you can't say that any of them is magical, because if you have 5 occurrences in 20 years and they all make and they're all profitable, that still doesn't give you any statistical significance at all. Whereas in this case, we had thousands of those chart patterns. And so, you know, if we build some sort of pattern recognition on top of the chart patterns, which is basically our linear regression, we can make much more of an inference of whether there is something interesting here or not. And so what I've done basically is, in my methodology, I went from really, really simple stuff to more complex stuff. So I started just adding the numbers. Obviously, this didn't work. Then I went and did something a bit different. I used machine learning, which is quite a different proposition. And I could see, hey, there is something in it. And then, of course, with my knowledge of the market, knowing that generally shorts don't do so well in the markets, I said, okay, well, what happens when I cut out the shorts and I just go long? And then it's not necessarily overfit. It's just a logical thing that I've been doing over and over again in my own trading strategies. So I did this, and then basically I ended up with the strategy that I'm presenting here. So you know, that's a step-by-step way. For example, obviously you can go much further than this, and you can refine the steps, and you can do specific things. But in a sort of very rough outline, you know, I went from simple to more complex to going like, oh, what makes rational, logical, economic sense to do here? And economic sense was to say, well, we go long only because that's just what we've seen in the markets over and over again, that long only is actually a better, has better profitability. All right, so there's a question from Saga. Thanks, Bali, for your question. So Saga, go right ahead with your question.
Yeah, Tom. So Tom, there are two questions. First is like, should we not use the actual, like our own functions rather than using a function from a different package? And second one is, since there are like multiple packages having the same functionality, like for example, tulip-py is also functioning in the same way as TA-Lib. So
Yes.
how do we compare and use, like which one should we use? How do we decide on that?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, basically, I mean, quite frankly, a lot of the time, I often just write my own functions for quite a few of the indicators. But having said that, TA-Lib's actually blistering fast compared to my own implementation sometimes. So it's actually a good idea to use TA-Lib. And I actually only figured out how to use TA-Lib in Colab for this specific talk. I never used it in Colab before. So it was only for tonight that I actually did it in Colab. And now that I know how to do it myself, I actually probably gonna use it a lot more because I'm gonna run it in Colab. It's actually really handy. Now with the other packages, it's like you can use whatever you want. Like it's really a question of what does it offer and what, you know, what's interesting to you. You know, the other packages, they might offer some different indicators. I mean, frankly, I'm not hooked on any indicators. I think, you know, the moving average is probably still the most powerful indicator that is out there for various reasons. And most other indicators are kind of more or less like the moving average or a moving average difference, because ultimately pretty much all the indicators, they work all on the same premise. And this is that a time series has autocorrelation in it. If a time series has no autocorrelation in it, any of the indicators is garbage, apart from the candlestick patterns. Okay, candlestick patterns are different, but all the other indicators that use look-back windows, they always work on the same premise that your time series needs to have autocorrelation. If it doesn't have autocorrelation, if it's just random or whatever, these indicators are all useless. None of them will do anything. So all indicators really do is exploit autocorrelation in your time series. And they all do that. And you can draw the most fancy patterns and stuff. They always use exactly the same thing over and over again. It's the autocorrelation, right? So this is really important to remember. So in some ways, personally, I'm pretty agnostic. I think just use whatever package works well for you. You know, TA-Lib seems to be the one that most people use, and it's quite popular. So I'm happy with that. And of course, you know, you could actually use a whole slew of indicators and do the same thing that I just did with the candlestick patterns. You could just do this with indicators. Like, you just got to be inventive, right? You could use neural networks and all sorts of other pattern recognition and see what happens, right? So yeah, so I hope that answers your question. I forgot what the first one was.
So basically, you have answered that. So should we focus on creating our own functions rather than depending on the other?
Don't create your own functions if someone has already built this in a better way for you. What I do create myself though is backtests. So backtesting platforms, I have never seen one that I was happy with. I always run my own backtests. And you're gonna make a lot of mistakes building your own backtests, but ultimately once you get the handle on it, it's so much better. Okay, so there was another question from Shivam. Shivam?
Hello. Yeah, hi,
Hi.
Tom. Yeah, Tom. So I have probably a comment to make and I wanted to have your take on that. So the first
Sure.
thing is that uh, yeah, so I think this is the first time I've like looked at TA-Lib, which statistically has some significance to it. I did fiddle around the notebook that you shared. I could improve it in some sense by dropping some variables, but yeah, if I have to, let's say, show it to my investment committee and portfolio managers, like it will be thrown around like as a garbage. So
Yeah,
that
100%. I can
yeah.
guarantee that.
So, but no, but this does look exciting. So I just wanted to have yours. So okay, let's say if I have to like probably create a retail strategy, like does it actually make some sense? Like statistically, can it be used? Second thing is that I'm more interested in, have you ever worked around with these indicators in a cross-sectional manner?
Yeah,
So
yeah, I have.
so yeah, so can you give some pointer on that and how can I think about that? Yeah.
Well, statistically, I obviously haven't done a exhaustive statistical analysis on this. I mean, I give this more as a demo to demonstrate how you could use TA-Lib in a more creative way. However, you know what I find is often, you know, you can do a lot of statistics and all those things, but what I found is the best trading strategy, like when, you know, this took me like literally half an hour to develop this whole thing, right? Or like the whole notebook maybe took me, I don't know, 2 hours to write at the most, right? And when I just built this in and I come across a strategy that looks good straight away without me not optimizing anything. I didn't optimize anything in this. There's actually not really any parameters to optimize in this strategy, right? That strategy doesn't really have parameters. So the fact that it's a non-parametric strategy makes it quite interesting. But obviously, you know, you don't necessarily want to present that to your investment committee as it is. You know, you need to do a lot more work around it, you know, maybe apply it to different assets, different asset classes, even portfolios and so on. So you need to do quite a bit more work to do this. And it might, you know, you might find that maybe if you do more work, it doesn't actually hold up as a strategy. So I told you, I'm not recommending you trading this. You always have to do a bit more work. This was purely as a demo, but nevertheless, I was, you know, generally, if I find something like that performance that outperforms the benchmark so quickly, that's generally definitely a good starting point for something. So I would go, oh, okay, cool. But obviously, you know, there's a lot more work that needs to be done to make this really good. Does that answer your question, or did I get this totally wrong? Sorry, if I apologize if.
No, no, Tom, it does. So yeah, the second part was that how you use it cross-sectionally, this indicator.
Okay. So basically, when you use cross-sectional indicators, or well, there's obviously many there's many ways to use indicators in a cross-sectional way, right? So you could, for example, you know, the most typical thing is when you build. Are you familiar with factor models, Shiva?
Yes.
Yeah. So you effectively use those indicators, for example, inside a factor model, and then you basically do a cross-sectional regression on your indicators, and then you can use these indicators cross-sectionally to rank your portfolio, and basically adjust your positions based on the ranking. So you could, for example, you know, just go, you can use the good old long short. So you take the whatever 20 top ranked ones and the 20 bottom ranked ones and just build a long short portfolio out of this. Or you could actually build a continuous portfolio. So you can plug them into a Markowitz, you know, Markowitz strategy and use your results, so your cross-sectional values as expected returns, for example, and do your portfolio adjustments that way. So there's many different ways to do it, or you could even use machine learning to adjust or to build your portfolio positions as well. So I'm not sure if this is what you mean. So if this isn't what you mean, maybe you can just explain it a little bit more.
No, I do get, Tom, what you're saying. So effectively, just point out if I'm incorrect in thinking. So what you're suggesting, I can use these indicator values as my factors, let's say in my factor model.
Exactly.
So I can,
yep.
So effectively, let's say RSI for different securities are comparable.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes
there's one caveat to this with those indicator values as in factor. You have to make sure that they're all stationary. Okay, so when you use indicators, you want to use oscillators, right? Don't use the moving average or anything like this. Obviously, this is not going to work. You need to make sure that all these indicators, they oscillate around a mean value. So if they're not stationary, so make sure before you use them, make sure they're stationary. Now, for example, with the moving average, what you could do is, instead of using the moving average, you could use a moving average difference. And because the moving average difference is always like, you know, it's sometimes the fast one is above the slow one and sometimes the other way, that's actually stationary. So you could use that as well. So you just have to make sure you use stationary series as inputs, not non-stationary ones. But that's easy. You can even visually check that. You just have to plot them out and you see straight away whether they're stationary or not. And if it's kind of questionable, don't use them.
Okay. Yep.
Makes
Thanks,
sense?
Tom.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. Is there any more questions? Anyone?
Hey, Tom, it's Alex Kovacheski here.
Alex.
Nice to hear your voice after many years.
Yes, nice to hear you too.
Listen, a couple of questions. So a comment and a question. So with the strategy that you showed, I'm a strong believer like you that it's very, very easy to do curve fitting.
Yes.
And to find things in these indicators that really aren't there.
Yep.
It's like the example where you look at some people look at the sketch drawing and it looks like an old woman, and then for some people it looks like a young woman.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same drawing, but people see it differently.
Yes.
Now, so I was going to say, with your comparison, you're comparing, entering and exiting an instrument with a buy and hold strategy going long.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to actually compare that up against a random strategy where the entries and exits over that period of time actually just occur at random without any instrument or any indicator being used at all?
Yeah, you can do that. I haven't done this in there. There's a few problems with random or comparing it to random strategies. One is the trade frequency of your random strategy needs to be similar to the trade frequency that you compare of your actual strategy. So one of the things is, for example, you could use a Poisson distribution. So you could fit a Poisson distribution to the occurrence of your entries and exits, and then sample from that Poisson distribution to build a random strategy, because otherwise you're not comparing like with like, right? So if you just have random entries and exits, then that will be very different from the strategy that you're running. So you have to be a little bit careful with this. And so Poisson sampling, for example, would be one way of doing that. Again, I haven't done that because that wasn't, that's a completely different topic. But it's definitely always good to do some of that. I mean, when it's not particularly overfitted in this case, I would definitely expect that the strategy to perform a lot better than the random one. But I mean, I can only guess that that's true, but I haven't verified that in any way, so I wouldn't know.
So yeah, fantastic. So I found that there's two other things. So the other one is I found that, like you, if whatever strategy I develop and implement on instruments, financial instruments that over time go up, they all revert to going long. But I found that some instruments, like a volatility index and a VIX stuff, that long and short on that seem to actually work quite well.
Yes.
Because it doesn't really go up over time. It's actually just reverting back to back to zero.
Yeah.
So I find that seems to work quite well for both long and short.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I've been doing a bit of work in the last couple of years using Postgres and Greenplum databases.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing some work with Madlib, but what I've been doing is actually putting these functions like TA-Lib into the database and then building up the data over a period of time.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the one thing that I've been doing. It's quite interesting. So, instead of sort of running it on the machine, it's actually building up over an ecosystem of equities, and being able to have it go back to the database and store a value and then use that value another time.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously like a lot of merit in collecting good data. But I wanted to make another point here. What you just said about some stuff works with long only and another one works with long short. There's a really good economic reasons why stocks, for example, are long only, but where, for example, futures or Forex is much more symmetrical. And basically the reason is that companies in general produce value. So when you look at the S&P 500, right, they're like the top companies, and they're actually producing value. So they're actually adding like value. So they're becoming more valuable as time goes by. So there should always be a general trend upwards. Whereas Forex is a zero-sum game. That there's no value appreciation in currencies. Okay. And you could say the same for a lot of the futures contracts, and specifically commodities. They're just much more symmetric. Like gold doesn't produce anything. Gold is a non-productive asset, and so it should be a lot more symmetrical. Even though there are times when it goes up more, it's generally a lot more symmetrical than, for example, equities. That's why you would often trade equities only on the long side, but then you would trade futures often on both on long and short side equally. But then, of course, that's not always true. Like, for example, with the E-minis, obviously, they just track the S&P 500. So, you have to obviously be quite careful. So, I mean, there are very solid economic reasons why you would, for example, trade an equity index on the long side only. And that's, so if that was, say, Forex, I would be a lot more hesitant to just go just long. Like I would really hesitate to do that. And if that gives me better results, I wouldn't just be so trigger happy and just present those results and say, hey, look at this. But with equities is a different story, right? So obviously now there's a lot of other factors. Quantitative easing plays a big role and all that sort of stuff. But that's a whole nother debate, right? It's like macroeconomics. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Anyone? Maybe we have time for one or two more. If anyone wants to ask something, now's your chance.
Tom, just a quick one on how clean is the data you get from Yahoo Finance, and the version of Colab that you use, is that the free version or
Colab?
Yeah, there's three different plans: free, $10 a month.
I just use the free plan.
Okay.
If I want to go better and bigger, then I just use my own servers. But Colab is just really handy because it's like quick and easy. And as I said, I love sitting in cafes and working on laptops. And one of the reasons why I really started using it is because it drains my battery a lot less. Literally, that was the reason. So, I mean, it's got like, for example, if you do a lot of AI, it's got these TPUs, the TensorFlow optimized processing units. They're phenomenally fast. I've done a bit of stuff with like TensorFlow, and they just, it's like they add like, huge speed if you run deep neural networks and stuff. But to be honest, for finance, deep neural networks are not that useful in most cases. So I don't know. But yeah, I just use the free version. I'm not really
sure. And how clean is the data? You were talking about using yfinance.
Oh, that's right. Well, no data is truly clean unless you get like, nanosecond tick data from the exchange. Even that isn't clean. Like, I found inconsistencies in that stuff as well. There is no clean data as such, and you got to be extremely careful. Like, so for example, if you use like if you use an open price and you think you can trade that, you're totally wrong. Because first of all, generally in equities, for example, the market open generally has an extremely wide spread. It's really illiquid and it's extremely volatile. There is no way you will get even close to the price on the open price. Now for the close price, you can kind of submit a market on close order, which kind of is the close price. But in the US, for example, you have to submit that 15 minutes before the market close. And then again, and during the close, the spreads are a little bit wider as well, and the volatility picks up. So like, clean data is one thing, but clean execution, so to speak, is a whole nother game, right? And you have to make you have to account for that when you actually test your strategies. Now, the lower the trading frequency that you have, the less of an impact that will have on your strategy. And generally, I mean, when I do my own, when I trade my own, say, super fund and stuff, like the retail stuff, I just use fairly big, long trading frequencies, generally not less than a week, just to avoid like getting those issues. And yes, of course, if you build like a good algorithm, you could, for example, if you want to execute bigger volumes, you could use an arrival price algorithm on the close and stuff like that. So there's ways to get around this, but it's generally not that easy. So clean data is definitely a thing. I mean, Yahoo Finance is generally not too bad, but it has its problems. So specifically, if you go to the smaller stocks and stuff, there's missing data, there is bad values and so on. So you have to be really quite careful. For the S&P 500, it's generally okay. But yeah, no, you never really know. Like whenever you use data, you always have to be careful what you're looking at. And then the other thing is, and this is like an investment thesis should generally at least have some sort of economic reasoning behind it. Like pure mathematics is always a bit like so, I always would say it's good to have some sort of economic underpinning of what you're actually trying to achieve, like whether it's a momentum or some sort of economic idea that makes it better. And that, again, if that's true, then the quality of your data is not necessarily a big fact, unless the data are really terrible, in which case you shouldn't use them anyway. Rubbish in, rubbish out.
Great. Thank you.
All right, I hope that answered your question. Anyone else? One more question? Claudio?
Yes. So what type of approach to measure volatility do you recommend?
To what type of approach to what? Can you say it again?
To measure volatility.
Something with volatility. I didn't. Sorry, yeah. I didn't quite
measure volatility.
Did anyone else understand what Claudio said?
Yeah, measure volatility.
Oh, to measure volatility. Sorry, Claudio. Your microphone somehow doesn't come through very well for me.
Okay, sorry.
To measure volatility. Well, that's a really good question. I don't think anyone has a good answer to that. I mean, obviously, there's all these things. So volatility is one thing, but then the question is, what do you want to use your volatility for? And quite a lot of times you go, well, volatility is really, you know, you look backwards when you measure volatility, right? You have a backward looking window. Maybe it's actually better to use implied volatility, like options volatility, to make more of a judgment, or perhaps even a combination of realized and implied volatility. So obviously for the S&P 500, the implied volatility is the VIX, which is good. But if you use anything else, what you probably want to look at is maybe the at the money options and the implied volatility of those, or a combination. Sometimes there's also something called the is it called the neutral I forgot what it was, but basically you can also derive volatility values from the whole option chain, which is a bit more accurate because it also takes into account tail events. Because obviously, when you have very high implied volatility on the wings of the option chain, or on the tails, whatever you want to call it, then that says that some people really believe there could be a major tail risk event happening. And so sometimes that's quite a useful measure, but really there is no reliable measure of volatility as such, to be honest. I'm still, like, what I'm ending up is using the most, like, this is always the funny thing. I always end up using the simplest things. Like I see all these complicated things, and often the simplest things done well are actually much more powerful. That's my opinion. But of course, that's not always true. And like using options volatility can be very powerful. So yeah,
okay.
Hope that answers your question. All right. Well, if unless anyone has a really pressing question, I want to close this for today. Again, thanks so much for coming. If you want, you know, I showed you earlier, I've got a YouTube channel. If you want to have a look, I've got quite a few videos on different topics on my YouTube channel. It's just Dr. Tom Stark. If you like, if you think they're useful to you, maybe smash the like button. That would help us a lot, because, you know, we obviously also want to give something back, and if the more people see it, the more, you know, we can we get views, and that helps us as well. So if you're interested in that, check it out. But other than that, thanks so much for coming along. I really enjoyed this myself, and I hope you enjoyed it too. If you haven't got the link yet, you know, Zoom always deletes all the chats and everything. So make sure, if you haven't got the link yet to the notebook, make sure you copy and paste it now. Otherwise, it'll just disappear. So make sure you got that if you want to follow the notebook along. And then if you have any other questions, maybe you can contact me on LinkedIn or something. And yeah, we can keep chatting. Otherwise, I plan to do this a bit more often now, now that I'm getting more used to Zoom. So I might do another one in 2 weeks or so. I've already got a few topics. I'm just not sure yet which one to choose. So if you want to come, just watch out for the announcements, and I might see you then. So thanks so much, and all the best.
Thanks, Tom.
Next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Tom. Great job.
Thank you. Bye.